We're finally back on the island. Although the episode LaFleur has a time flash and flash forwards, I'm gonna tell everything in 4 parts. Part 1, the final time flash, ancient times. Part 2, 1974. Part 3, the 3-year gap. Part 4, 1977. Part 1.
God damn it, hold on!
We're nearing the end of the time traveling shenanigans, and just to make things a little more adventurous before we were settling down in the 70s, the final time flash takes us to ancient times. Which means that our characters, even Rose, Bernard and Vincent, as well as that random zodiac raft, time travel many centuries back in time. The statue of Tavaret has been completed, and as you see on the color, it has a more browner tint than the one we see in the 1860s up until the present day. I think that's due to the color of it, washing away over the many centuries it stood there. Some have questioned whether or not the statue and the Egyptians came before or after Jacob's birth, and we'll go into that when we come to season 6, but if they happened after, then I think we're at least in the 1st century AD at the earliest. What's interesting is that by bringing the rope from the well, from the future and into the past, Sawyer has created a situation where a rope is sticking out of the ground. If Man in Black's followers or other Egyptians are still actively searching for magnetic places on the island, trying to find the source of the light, they would surely encounter this area, not too far from the civilization at the statue, and then dig, and then find the perfect place to build the wheel, because this area over here is not the same one where Man in Black dug his own well in Across the Sea. Another thing that is the opposite of what Sawyer does is that Jin puts the machete into this tree, but since he's not holding onto it while the flash happens, the machete is simply stuck in that tree in that exact period of time. However, when the well is back in 1974, the machete is no longer there. So many years after the Egyptians died out and the structure around the well was in ruins, but before the DHARMA Initiative came to the island, someone found this machete and took it. Maybe the same people who filled up the well with dirt and rocks just decided to take it. It originally came from the 1950s others, so it wasn't Jin's to begin with. A different thing, and this is cool, is that the body of Charlotte stays behind in the last time flash. By the time the group get to Daniel in 1974, he says that her body stayed behind, as in stayed behind in ancient times, probably 2000 years back in time. Could it be that some Egyptians found a skeleton in some weird modern clothing, and even spotting a modern watch? Those things would decompose much slower, and since there is no skeleton there in the 70s, then someone did find her body and that watch. Therefore, the first place on Earth to have a watch 1600 years before they were invented was the island. Isn't that extremely fitting for a place where time travel is possible? The corpse of Charlotte might have been studied by the Egyptians, trying to figure out who this mysterious person with alien technology came from. Her fate became the first practice of archaeology on the island, and additionally, one of the first instances of the study of archaeology in the world. Her death caused all of this. Part 2, 1974. John Locke moves the wheel and the final time flash takes him to 1974. When the show keeps flashing from 1974 to 1977 in this episode, the title card maintained that it is 3 years apart. Something that Sawyer confirmed later on.
You've been here, living with the DHARMA Initiative for the past 3 years.
That's right. How long has it been for you since the chopper?
3 years.
With the Oceanic 6 survivors, they got rescued at the end of December 2004, and then the Agua 316 plane departed in likely November or December 2007, so there is a definitive 3-year gap. However, the 1977 events happened in July, not December, so I deduce that the events in this episode, as in the 1974 events, happens in July 1974, just so that we close down a perfect 3-year gap. So in July 1974, they go down the hill, and since they are not near any construction workers here, the DHARMA Initiative have not started building the Orchid. Then the group will travel down south towards the base camp. Another group who is heading south is Paul and Amy, who want to have a picnic in the valley. Our heroes are gonna pass a lot of jungle area until they hear a gunshot. Our heroes step in and kill the others. They bury them and then carry Paul up north towards the barracks, led by Amy.
Let me do the talking.
You really think you can convince them that we were in a boat wreck?
I'm a professional. I used to lie for a living.
Daniel, stop!
Daniel almost walks into the sonic fence. Amy adjusts the level down. The group will therefore be brought up to the barracks by a number of DHARMA members. Paul's body is taken to the infirmary. After talking to the group, Horace talks to Sawyer at the rec room. I found this comment by Horace quite interesting.
What kind of ship?
Salvage vessel. Searching for a famous lost wreck. It's an old slaver out of Portsmouth, England, called Black Rock. Ever heard of her?
Can't say that I have.
Seeing as Horace is the leader of the DHARMA Initiative on the island and has been here for a while, surely he would know about the Black Rock, right? Maybe he didn't travel to the ship while on the island, and this was something done by Alvar Hansson, possibly the Groots, but I doubt it, since even Radzinski knew about the Black Rock and its location. I think Horace likely kept that information just to be safe, easier to maintain control instead of guiding them to the shipwreck. I can imagine that after they got his trust, he would tell Sawyer that he does know about the Black Rock. Anyway, they let him out to the group, over here. Then we have an alarm. Richard Alpert arrives in their compound. The others have a way of entering the barracks as was seen in The Man Behind the Curtain, and it might be through the tunnels. There were likely openings up to the barracks back then.
Hefty, keep an eye on them.
Horace talks to Richard, then enters here. Phil goes to the security office and calls the Arrow. Sawyer has an awesome conversation with Richard before heading back to the infirmary. The others need to bring Paul's body back. The others might have a specific ritual when it comes to people they themselves have murdered, in situations where some of them have been murdered. Maybe they have a burial at sea with 2 others that killed Paul, and a separate boat for Paul. There is also the possibility that Richard wants to tell his people that justice was served, that Paul killed 2 of the others and was executed by Richard and Horace for doing this crime. Or maybe they need to burn the body of Paul. Everything is there to keep the truce maintained. If Richard did not bring Paul back, the others would question why 2 of their own people are dead and there are no evidence or repercussions of what happened.
Order's 2 weeks. Horace said we can wait for the next sub. Any luck, Locke will be back by then.
I'm a bit curious about why Juliet would be left alone at the dock after the whole tense situation, where they had to set the sonic fence to maximum, although it makes sense that if they were scheduled to leave with the sub in the early morning, then maybe she boarded one of the buses that would take the sub crew to the dock, and they are currently in the submarine and making it ready to go in like an hour or so, and Juliet decided to be there early. If they are scheduled to leave anyway, then there are no problems in having her just wait around here, and then while Horace and Richard turn off the fence to bring out Paul's body, Sawyer would leave with them and then travel with a DHARMA member to the dock to tell Juliet that she can stay for 2 weeks. Part 3. The Time Gap. At first, Rose and Bernard realize that the time flashing are over, and they try to find a peaceful area off the island where they won't be bothered by the others or the DHARMA Initiative. I'll explore that area when we come to it in the season 5 finale, since that has been a fun challenge. During the 2-week time gap, the DHARMA Initiative likely assisted the group with jeeps to travel around the island looking for LaFleur's remaining crew. I think our heroes started to realize that everyone died at the Flaming Arrow's attack. Horace might have clued James about the Black Rock after all, and maybe they arrived there and could pretend to study it. I mean, they already have a professor amongst the group, so convincing the DHARMA Initiative that they were part of a shipwreck wouldn't be too hard. The 2 weeks became 3 years. The group became part of the DHARMA Initiative. Let's look at what happened to the 5. And we'll begin with Daniel Faraday. The DHARMA scientists got to know Daniel very well, so well that he would soon be working closely with the research they do. After all, Daniel, being a professor in physics, has a catalog of knowledge from discoveries in science and technology. Daniel Faraday went to Ann Arbor, which would lead to some of the off-screen scenes I desperately wanted to see in his centric episode The Variable. Faraday would meet Gerald and Karen de Groot, as well as Alvar Hansson. I firmly believe that Faraday is one of the people mentioned by Hansson himself in the 1975 Hansson video.
The precise location of the facility is known only to myself, the de Groots, the few high-ranking members of my organization.
I mean, he's working in Ann Arbor and knows about the island, as well as how to calculate a safe bearing to the island. The DHARMA Initiative might have had trouble with people getting sick, as well as some unfortunate delays in food drops. Faraday noted down in his journal about the time dilation and perhaps assisted them here to have a more precise entry point. This calculation was forwarded to the station in Guam so that all food drops would correctly wind up on the island. For all we know, he might have planted the idea of studying space-time. The orchid might have been his idea after all, since it's using similar techniques that he developed when he was testing mind travel on his rat. His findings would have been perfect for this. Halifax mentions the Casimir effect in the orchid orientation film, which is part of the quantum field theory, something Faraday is an expert on. I can imagine that the board at Ann Arbor are discussing the research done on the island and that they found a pocket of exotic matter near that well. And maybe someone says that it's too unpredictable and they should just forget about it and not build anything there. Or maybe someone proposes to create a station there, calling it the Goblet or something, and Faraday shoots in with some ideas, a different name or some theory or calculations. Faraday was not the only one who got promoted. James showed great leadership skills when he handled the situation in this episode and would continue to do so for the rest of the time here. He would be promoted to head of security, and while doing so he would develop a relationship with Juliet and continue sending Jin and Miles out to scout for John Locke or any of the remaining survivors. Jin would gradually learn English. It would be quite weird for Jin and LaFleur to revisit the Arrow in its glory days, since they both spent time there 30 years in the future. Miles realized something weird quite quickly. On the third day, his mother went in line at the cafeteria, so he is about to learn that both his parents are here. It would be crazy that during the 3-year gap he would bump into his mother and at some point see that she is pregnant and realize that there is a fetus of himself right in front of him. One person who did not get promoted or made use of her skills was Juliet. I find that interesting. Maybe she was not needed as a fertility doctor, since the doctor in this episode says that mothers are sent to the mainland to give birth. As much as they have a nice infirmary, it is much safer to do it in a real hospital.
Don't you understand that every time I try to help a woman on this island give birth, it hasn't worked?
Well, maybe whatever made that happen hasn't happened yet.
LaFleur is right that the event that caused the pregnancy issues hasn't happened yet, but maybe Juliet has seen too many pregnant women die for the past 3 years and decided that she would try something entirely different here in Dharma Town, so she made use of herself in a different field. Part 4, 1977. Horace goes over here and blows some dynamite. Rosie comes to the security office with some brownies, has a hootenanny with Jerry. Phil sees Horace on the monitor.
You really want to wake LaFleur
No,
up?
of course not.
No, maybe we can handle this ourselves.
Maybe
huh?
Horace blows himself up and LaFleur kills us for not waking him. We gotta go now!
Phil and Jerry run to the LaFleur house over here. They likely go back while he dresses up to get the van. Jim LaFleur gets Miles into the van. One thing I didn't account for when making the barracks map was that Miles is actually exiting a house here, and by the looks of it from the angle and the area, as well as the way they turn the van and drive out of here, Miles seems like he's exiting this house in one of the side doors maybe. In my map of the barracks, I've put Miles' house over here, since that is the house where he has them in house arrest.
Jack and Hurley and Kate as quick as you can. Put them in the house and sit on them.
What for?
You're telling us we're under house arrest?
Which I assumed was his own house. However, this could be Jin or Faraday's house, or even his own. I doubt that he would keep them at house arrest at someone else's house. It's too big of a risk in case they blabber about where they came from. Or this house he's exiting in this episode is not his house. He was staying over with a woman, and judging by LaFleur's smirk and him calling him Enos, a reference to the guy in Dukes of Hazzard, maybe he knows that Miles was not at his own house and slept with a fellow Dharma woman. They drive to the Sonic fence, then take Horace home. That means his home over here, which is Horace and Amy's residence.
Where'd you find him?
By the flame, blowing up trees with dynamite.
I think it's interesting that he says this. Why lie and say at the flame when he was at the Sonic fence? Maybe because Horace is not a drinker that it would be easier to slightly lie to Amy. Say that he might have had a cozy board game evening at the flame with some guys which got out of hand and involved alcohol, and then he got a little bit too much to drink and while heading out he started blowing up trees. That being a more tolerable explanation instead of him going to the deadly Sonic fence, almost killing himself and getting shit-faced all alone. I think Amy would find the former situation to be more forgiving. Amy is taken to the infirmary. Her baby is coming. The intern doctor has looked at the situation, possibly for hours, because it is now daytime. In an off-screen scene, Jin will head out to grid 133 to look for the people. If grid 133 is near 134, where he will find Jack, Kate and Hurley the next day, then that means that grid 133 is down south someplace. If we look at the map in Season 6, the DHARMA Initiative have various squares for their maps, so it's likely that they've got a grid map like this of the island. Back in the barracks, LaFleur is now running out to the motor pool over here, where he will get Juliet. Jin returns from grid 133 and meet up with James.
Any luck?
We finished grid 133 today. No sign of our people. No one.
134 then.
While they talk, Ethan is born. Juliet will go home, shower and change. LaFleur presumably goes back to the security office for his workday. Later he strolls through the barracks and picks up a flower. He returns to his house, she prepares dinner and then heads to Horse's house next door, who is now waking up. James goes back to his house, sleeps with Juliet, so I presume that the next scene is taking place the next day. The episode doesn't specify if there is a time jump between Horse's hangover and this scene, but Pierre Chang confirms that Amy had a baby last night. Well, she had contractions the night before and gave birth in the middle of the day, so Pierre Chang means yesterday, meaning that this day, which Lostpedia counts as day 1, starts in the morning where Jin has taken the DHARMA van to head down south to grid 134. Jack wakes up in the bamboo forest, filmed at Nuanu watershed. He runs towards the screams. Hurley is in the waterfall and so is Kate. Jin finds them.
Jin?
At the same time, Saeed just pops up in the jungle. They all head to the North Valley, and this is a brand new location on the show. LaFleur will take the jeep and drive all the way up here as well. This is filmed at Kaena Point State Park. It's the westernmost tip of the island of Oahu. In fact, it's past the Mokulea Beach, the original crash site beach. This film location should be over here, as illustrated in this photo. It's a remote shoreline, but on the island of Lost, it's this northernmost tip of the island. It's an excellent place to meet these characters because it's so remote, with no DHARMA surveillance stations, others, or any other human activity. They step out of the van and the episode ends. Next episode is also quite mythological and features a lot of the island. Stay tuned.